What is going on, investors? Back again. Time to take a look at one of the world's largest automobile manufacturers and one of the oldest, maybe the oldest, Ford Motor Company, ticker symbol F. I pulled up a max chart of this. Man, this stock's been around a long time, obviously about probably over 100 years, but it's been trading on the stock exchange, at least according to this chart, back from the 70s, before I was even born, probably since most of you were born. We see the stock's trading at $7 now. Back in the '08 time frame, this stock got down to a penny stock. It was like $1-2. But really, man, in more normal times, this stock hasn't traded this low in a long time, since like the 90s. I was like in elementary school. The other thing we see as low is this valuation. We got a $27 billion valuation. We're going to jump into the numbers here in a minute, but take a look. For 6 months here, they did $54 billion worth of sales. So give them credit for $100 billion in sales for the whole year, and they got a $27 billion market cap. They're trading like at 0.3 of sales. Compare that to Tesla, and man, either Ford looks super undervalued or Tesla looks super overvalued. So I can see why people are really excited about this stock. Now, some other reasons why I think investors are excited about this stock, and again, we're going to jump into the numbers. We're going to jump into the stock chart. I actually think this stock chart looks pretty nice, so you're going to want to stick around to see that. But what I think investors, let's face it, it's a tough time to be an automobile manufacturer. It's a tough time for anybody. We even saw, even for Tesla and for some of those brands, it's not an easy time right now. The economy's tight, manufacturing's tough to do. So it's a tough time. But I think Ford is going to trade more on news and positive momentum than necessarily like the brass tacks bottom and top line of their financials. Not saying that these financials aren't going to matter, but if they can execute on some of the products that they've got coming up, I think it's going to build some momentum behind the stock. So they just elevated a new CEO. This Jim Hackett guy was not popular. The stock did not react well. He basically just did a lot of cost cutting. I don't think he really innovated on the brand a whole lot. He just really cut costs, and obviously that's going to affect company morale, employee morale, and things like that. And so maybe they just hired a new was the chief operating officer, Jim Farley. Now he's promoted to the CEO position. So I don't know how well liked he is within the company, but I think just replacing the CEO will give this stock a little bit more positive momentum, and it could bring them into a new era. Now, what's going to, I think, really help this company is new products. And in my opinion, they have an absolute home run. Now, I'm a European car guy. You won't catch me dead in an American car unless possibly a Tesla. But look, this Bronco looks to me like an absolute home run of a car. They've got over 100,000 pre-orders on this thing, so people are lining up very quickly to get these. Okay, they haven't even manufactured these things yet. They haven't delivered any yet. So to get 100,000 pre-orders to me shows really, really, really strong demand. Now we'll see how that plays out with the economy being the way it is, but I think there's going to be plenty of consumers that are going to be able to afford this, or at least put this on their credit and afford this type of car. I think this model will be popular. I think this open top, more like Jeep model, will be popular. I think across the board, this Bronco is going to be a home run. Now, is it going to be more popular than that F-150 or maybe the vans that they sell to commercial fleets? Probably not, but at 100,000 pre-orders, I think this could quickly become a top 2, 3, 4 product over at Ford. And since this is based on a current platform, they base this off the Ranger pickup platform. I think they're going to be able to squeeze a lot of profit out this, kind of like they used to do in the 90s and 2000s with the Ford Explorer. To me, this reminds me, this could have the popularity of the Ford Explorer that when I was a kid was easily one of the most popular SUVs on the market. I think this will be a little bit more niche of a product, but it could be a little bit more high end. And they could squeeze some more margin out of this. It could almost be like these F-150 trucks, which, gosh, you go to a dealership, these things fully loaded can be as much as a high-end Mercedes car. So the other product that they have coming out, I don't expect this to be a big seller, like a big numbers driver, but the 22 2022 Ford F-150 Electric. I kind of like this concept where they're taking their number one product and then they're going to electrify it. So I think if they can pull this off, I think there's going to be truck buyers that are not going to buy this truck because it's probably not going to have the towing capacity. It's going to be more like a city guy truck. You know, it's not going to be for the general contractor, at least not yet. But if they can successfully turn this into an electric car, you get your number one product. You're going to get a lot of attention when you come out with the electric one. Maybe you can make an all-electric Bronco a couple years later. So it's something that I think the company can start to get behind. And if they can get into this trend of electric cars, I mean, we see electric car companies with no product, no manufacturer capability, and their valuation, it's not quite like Ford yet, but their valuation on a price to sales basis is infinity times Ford. So if Ford can get on this electric train and get the Ford F-150, their most popular product out there with this electric vehicle drivetrain, I think that will be extraordinarily positive for the stock. Now, let's jump into the numbers. What would also be positive for the stock is if this virus goes away and the economy gets back to normal, then Ford and all the other car manufacturers can start having a little bit easier time selling cars. They kick it off with a cash flow statement. They obviously want you to take a look at that because the net income number, Ford's financials, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because their financials are a little bit different than a lot of companies. But I would look at very much study cash flows here. And they went from 10 billion down to 8.6, but that's not that bad considering the net income went from a positive 1.3 billion down to a net loss of close to $900 million. Now, finally, from a sales perspective here, we've got automotive, Ford Credit, and mobility here. We see for the 6-month ended, we went from 73 billion all the way down to call that 48 billion. Man, that's really rough on that top line. And then finally down here, we went from 80 billion down to 53, call it 54 billion. Now, that's a tragic kind of drop off. And you take a look at our cost here, we spent 58 to make 53. So obviously that's not a great trade-off. You end up having this operating loss here of 4.3 billion. And that's really where I would study Ford. If Ford starts to turn this operating income, or in a loss in this case, they start to turn this positive and they start to tick up these cash flows, I think that would be extraordinarily positive for the stock. And I think the way they're going to do it is by releasing new products and getting a lot of, strong demand behind those. Now, from a balance sheet perspective, things look pretty darn good here. They kind of refinanced some debt down here, and they've got some debt on the books, but it's not that bad, considering that a company like this typically runs on lots of debt. They were able to refinance it at a relatively decent rate considering how low priced the stock is. And they've got this $31 billion worth of cash. And so I think this is a company, it's being priced almost like it's going to go out of business. And I guess that's certainly possible, but I think this is a company with a financial runway, and they have done enough cost cutting over the years. I mean, this was an absolute disaster of the last 6 months, and they really only shed $4.3 billion from the operating income side, and they still had positive cash flows from the operating business. So this is a company that, again, they were able to refinance this debt. We see here long-term debt, we did 26 and we paid off 25. So they basically, in my opinion, they did kind of like a refi there. So this is a company from the balance sheet, from the cash flows. It's not looking good, but it's about what you expect. It's almost like an airline stock. It's like a movie theater stock. It's like a cruise line stock. You got to start to look past that at some point if you want to be bullish this stock. If you're just totally not bullish on Ford, I get it. So let's jump over the stock chart. Now, this actually looks pretty strong to me. So we made a bottom down here at like $4. I tried to draw a trend line in here. I crossed out a couple spots where this stock actually did break down, but it seemed like every time this stock broke down below trend, buyers stepped in. In fact, it would gap. So it would come back up here to the trend line. You see a gap here. Same thing happened here. The stock traded right on this trend line. It broke down, but then it traded back up and then it would gap up. And so to me, and you had a nice little gap up here. And so you're actually filling this gap with this order. So this stock is hugging this trend line here, which I think is a relatively bullish sign, especially if this company can keep the positive momentum going going behind product launches. I think this is going to be a press release company, okay, which is not typical for a company this old. Okay, if they can turn it into a press release, we're going to get into electric vehicles, we're doing the Bronco, we're doing Ford Mustang electric, whatever it is. If they can get that momentum rolling, I actually think this stock has had some positive momentum. We've seen every time it's broken down since kind of the bottom here, the stock has actually performed very nicely. Now we're touching this trend line again. So this actually is one of the first times I've done a video where you can, if you want to buy into Ford and you buy that this trend line that I've drawn in here, and it's kind of rudimentary, if you buy that this trend line is going to hold, well, if this trend line holds and this stock gaps up again or kind of pops off here, there's not a lot holding it back. Honestly, I could see this stock getting up into the $7 range. If you get some real strong momentum, it could get into the high sevens. There's not a lot holding this stock back from getting all the way up into the $8 range, $8, $9 range, which is a good $2 to $3 over where it trades today. And again, when we look at a price to sales basis, if you want to compare this, I wouldn't necessarily compare it to Tesla, but if you want to compare to GM or some of the other car makers, they don't get a lot of credit on their valuation. And that's why if this company can start transforming its product line to get these higher margin SUVs in here, to get some electric cars, start pumping. If I was this company, I would just start pumping the electric. I mean, look at Nikola Motors and some of these car companies that don't even have a product basically, and they have a massive valuation and massive interest in their stock. I would start pumping the electric, car train as fast as I possibly could. So this to me is a stock where it's setting up kind of nicely if it bounces off. Now, if it doesn't bounce off this trend line, it's going to trade down. Okay, this stock is going to break this trend line, and then it would break trend, which would be a negative. I could see it then trading back into this $6 range. Again, I'm not here to predict necessarily where the stock's going. I'm just letting you know where it could potentially go over the next weeks to months if you wanted to go long this stock. Typically, most people that view my channel are looking to kind of go long. They believe in the company. They just want maybe the extra reinforcement if they're going to want to buy shares. I just see a fair amount of demand. Again, we're kind of seeing like a little bit of consolidation right here as well. And so typically when you see this type of like wedge action, you get a break one way or the other. Okay, it could just stay in a range. Okay, this stock could just kind of make a range here. That's possible too. We could start trading sideways. That range actually could come back down to here, which is if you're bullish, Ford, it actually wouldn't be a bad sign for the stock to start trading flat down here. Let's see if I can get this trend line in the right spot. So it's possible we could also do something like this, because if you see these tops back up in here, this stock actually could, it's possible we could just be stuck in this range as well with Ford. And so you don't necessarily have to jump the gun with this thing, but we're stuck right here in the middle of the range. If you think this stock is going to trade up, I think this thing could easily get up to 7.25. Okay, if it's stuck in this range and it kind of bounces down here, it could come down to 6. So I think the risk reward on this thing is not bad. Now, it's all about your allocation side. I know this is a $7 stock, so newer investors, or I shouldn't say newer investors, maybe investors with smaller account size get excited about this. It really doesn't matter. I'd rather have 1/10 of Amazon stock than 10 shares of a company that isn't going to make it or isn't going to do as well as Amazon. So I would, on a $1,000 portfolio, I think you could have 10 shares of this. I think you can have maybe even 15 shares of this. This is a company that can use its brand, can use its legacy. It certainly could. If these products are winners, I think it's going to propel this stock. One thing you just want to know is this stock, take a look from 2013 all the way to today. You can just come in here and see this stock is in a pretty defined downtrend. Now we've kind of bounced back here. And so that's kind of, for me, that's kind of the exciting part, is this stock is kind of rallied here. We're still in this defined downtrend. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not saying that this stock is going to go to the moon anytime soon. It's got to break this overall trend. In fact, if this stock gets over that $9 mark, gets over some of this mark, $9, $10 mark, which is all the way up here. Obviously, we're retracing back to kind of highs that we made earlier in the year. So there we go. That's Ford for me. It's actually a decent setup. I think both from a chart perspective, I think the financials, you almost have to throw them out the window like you're doing with airline stocks. But from a product perspective, I'd actually be kind of excited about this. And again, I'm not an American car guy. I'm not a truck guy. Much prefer driving my Mercedes, but this is a strong product, I believe. And I think switching CEOs is also going to give the company some more positive momentum with shareholders as well. So there's Ford for you. Hopefully you enjoyed that one. We'll be back again. I think Berkshire Hathaway reports tomorrow, so we'll have a little bit of weekend action. We'll see what Warren Buffett's been up to, and we'll do some more this weekend. Thanks for everybody that has subscribed. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.